Good morning and good afternoon for my guest. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email. And my guest today, Sean Duffy, my friend and colleague and fellow soldier in the trench wars of real-time content. Sean, you're the founder of Reignite and also an email consultant, correct?
Yeah. So the Reignite came out of the consultancy, really, is the need to be able to get stuff into an email without having to work with every single ESP's different APIs or limitations. So that's how we've come about, really.
So for the probably 98% of guests who are real time, what the heck are they talking about? We'll do a brief orientation here. What Sean's company and my company, Campaign Genius, both do in varying ways is try to make the content that shows up in your inbox get there more easily, more recently, in a more timely fashion, or even, God forbid, to have it reflect conditions that have changed since the thing was sent. Fundamentally, the fetch of image content from email is kind of the backbone of this, right?
Yeah. And we talk about it as being the real-time email industry, but I think we've talked about this before. That's a bad badge for what we do, because the real-time element is a teeny part of what we do. There's so many other reasons why. And I think that causes us headaches when people start talking about MPP and all these other things that mean that we're going to be massively impacted.
Yes.
Because as an industry, we haven't been able to probably market ourselves properly because we've been badged with that real-time terminology.
Yeah. I mean, this is going to be the inside baseball episode of Future of Email, but darn it, it's important. Now, let me frame this again for those of you listening or going, what the heck are they talking about? Sean's based in the UK, Leicester, I believe, correct?
Yep.
Yep. And I'm way across the pond and across the country in the Pacific Northwest of the US. Campaign Genius, customer base mostly US. You could nominally say, well, Sean and Matthew were competitors, but A, that's not how email works. B, the real-time piece of it is such a relatively small industry that I think it's much more important for all of us to get better at our game and build awareness of it than to worry about whether or not we're going to run into each other in the market, because we never have.
No. And we're primarily UK based. You're primarily US based. So I'm sure we both take revenue where it comes from.
Yeah. Well, nature of a startup for sure. Do a bit of history, because we've never talked about this. You said Reignite came out of the consultancy, but how long ago? And do you remember the glimmer of, wait a minute, I think we can do this, that got you going?
Yeah, blimey. So my background is 20 years this year. I've been in the email marketing industry, which, well, is that congratulations? I'm not sure sometimes, but, and I sort of started off at a small UK ESP where there was four of us at the time, and we launched an ESP, got quite successful. I was there for sort of 10 years, went client side, got really frustrated having been in an ESP, and effectively we could do anything we needed to do for a client. If we couldn't do it, we'd go build it. So then, okay, I need to do all these things, mainly around personalization for a footwear retailer, and a lot of data analysis and transformation of things. And there just wasn't the solutions out there. And we didn't want to go work with a big enterprise kind of customer. So that's where sort of Segmentum is the name of the consultancy, where that sort of sprang from, which was all around how can we bridge that gap between, you've got an ESP, which maybe have lots of bells and whistles, and you have sort of strategies and plans, but how do you sort of bridge any gaps there are, really, and get very sort of hands-on. And so a lot of what we did on that side was around taking customers' data, transforming it to something useful for them to do segmentation, and lots of sort of personalization around building bespoke recommendation models and things. And then we come to, okay, let's send that email, and how on earth do we get, all this individualized content for each individual recipient into MailChimp, into bigger ESPs, and how do we do that in a manner which we don't have to reinvent the wheel each time? And clearly we've been around the email space for quite a while, so we were able to see what other people were doing, and so it wasn't our idea in the first place. So we sort of stumbled upon, well, this is what the likes of, say, MoveMyLink are doing, which of course were the very first in our industry to really do this. And our initial kind of play was we actually running real. We used to pre-generate all the images that we ever needed. So we would take a product catalog
Yeah.
of 40, 50,000 products and create all the different images that we'd need for them. That was our first stab in the dark. But then, of course, you evolve over time,
Yeah.
and probably a few years into the sort of the business, we'd got it to the point where we could serve it live, and it's much more flexible and things. And as technology over time has become more accessible, I think it's fair to say it's the reason why you and I are able to operate in the market nowadays is because the likes of Amazon Web Services, Google Cloud, they make it so much easier for startups to come into the market. So we're able to do that, and that was primarily really to serve personalized product content into emails. But then, of course, you see, okay, well, if we can do this, then we can also do some of the other real time things, whether it be store locators, it might be weather forecasts, it might be making decisions based on where they are right now, personalized images, all of those things we sort of started to sort of play with. But very much we are our sort of, I guess, motivation is all around individualized content for recipients.
Yeah.
The real classic real time stuff is very much kind of secondary, and it's because, well, we could do so. Let's also do that at the same time. It's not our passion project, I would say. Some of those things. Yeah.
Well, I'd say one way I've explained it to people is like, there's a box in your email, maybe rectangle shaped, it may be square, but there's a box that's going to get filled in with a graphic. We can fill it in at the last minute with darn near anything, and it tends to be the biggest single design element in the email, and the fact that so frequently it's filled with off the shelf last minute stock photo pick is such a wasted opportunity in terms of communication and brand and motivation and moving people to, act and all the other things you're trying to do with marketing content. Like, why is email so visually damn boring? Can we change this, please?
Yeah, and it's when you start telling people that they can use their own fonts, or add stylings that they can do. The visual element is really important. I think that's what real time doesn't necessarily describe so much.
Yeah. Agreed. And Sean's also, you're also alluding to something both of us have had to grapple with in the last, gosh, it's coming up on a year. Apple announced in June a year ago, 2021, that they would start handling images in email differently. They would prefetch and not reload those. And that's had an effect on many other aspects of email marketing. But for sure, for the niche of real-time content, I think, see if this resonates with you. When people who I know are really good in this space go, oh, well, I guess real-time content is dead. I want to smack them upside the head.
Yeah, I mean, we're both members of Only Influencers. We join the Thursday calls, and there's been a few of those times where I've kind of there's a few of us in the real time space on those calls, and we can kind of look at each other and sort of, roll the eyes and things as well. It's a fairly it's coming from a good place, I think.
Yeah.
That sort of comment, but it's perhaps not so educated.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a few things about that. Well, first of all, as we've talked about, real time isn't the main thing.
No.
Anymore. It really isn't, but it's the badge we've given ourselves. The other thing is the way Apple does the prefetching. Well, we shouldn't really call it prefetching either. It does some fetching. That could be before they open the email, but most likely it's afterwards. And again, our friends at MoveLink, who's got by far more data than you and I can sort of throw together, they also came out with the research piece that showed that virtually all of the click-throughs that they track at the same time occurred very shortly after the open, which suggests that, the opens that Apple's prefetching are late in the day. It tends to be sort of 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock PM onwards. You get this secondary spike.
Yep.
And they're people which aren't going to open the email anyway. So there's this probably, I don't know, a sort of finger in the air of about 85% accuracy if you could create an algorithm to sort of work out what's a real open or not on Apple. So from that point of view, it's still mainly real time anyway.
Yeah. And as more of the broader statement that you made that the real time or last minute change of the content is not at all the only game in town when you've gained the capability to manipulate that significant piece of email content. And yet it's the moniker, it's the sector label we've hung on ourselves.
Yeah, because that was the unique thing, wasn't it? When various people started coming out with these technologies, it was the thing which grabbed people's attention. You know, countdown timers, the ability to, create these maps or weather forecasts based on, which used to be based on IP address, which is no longer really possible either. And yeah, everybody sat up and paid attention. But when we drilled down to where all the real value is, it's things like it's around the automation piece. So a client doesn't have to manually sit there and code that content. It's automatically produced for them, which then means you can have infinite versions of that content, which means that you save so much time. And we have a client where they send an email every single day with their TV listings in. They don't touch it. It's automatically
Nice. Wow.
produced for them. And it does have some real time elements in there as well, in terms of, working out the hour of the day they're in currently to highlight things. But that's saving three graphic designer days a week.
Wow.
So it's significant. That's one area. But then the real value is, how do I get some of these complex personalization projects done when I've got an ESP which doesn't really have user-friendly personalization tools? I would need to sort of have a coder involved, from the IT team, which kind of isn't really available for most people, because they're all going to come back and say, yeah, you can have that resource for a week in 3 months' time. So it's also about giving marketers, I think, control over that personalization and breaking it down into a project they can manage, and not have to go for that extra resource.
Which is an increasingly expensive resource. This just occurred to me, but perhaps it's a fair comparison. Websites, because they're delivered when a page is opened, and because there's a legit language that runs in the browser, websites in theory would be a lot easier to personalize than email. And there are many web delivered vehicles, LinkedIn, Facebook are obviously examples, that are personalized to the nth degree. But interestingly, I guess most websites aren't personalized to any particular level. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would. Yes. I would agree to it 9 times out of 10.
Where I'm running with that thought that just occurred to me, because same is true of email. Personalization in email, let's leave dear Sean, dear Matthew out of the mix. That's not really personalization anymore. Most email messages, personalization, light or not at all, because, and I'm back to your thought about the developer, because it's actually a very complicated thing to pull off. Website or email, like impactful personalization, requires such a degree of control of data and such a degree of complexity in the delivery platform that, at the moment at least, it's still kind of a developer level job.
Yes, but also I think because there isn't a huge history of marketers managing that, they don't have the experience. And if you haven't done something before, it's really difficult. So I don't find it difficult because I've done it a lot. Same with you. It's like I've learned that skill now. I've got a lot of experience. So I think even the understanding all of the hoops you have to jump through, it's a big switch off, because where do you kind of start? So I think that's an issue. And I think certainly again in the email space, the existing tools that the marketers rely on, they haven't really tackled personalization in a user-friendly way. There's a tick of the box that, yes, you can connect to a feed, or you can create dynamic content rules, but you might even have a user-friendly interface for that, but that's not scalable. Some of them will have glorious AI solutions, which are usually fairly generic, and you can't tailor to your needs.
And again, if the data house isn't in order, it's hard, right? And by saying data house in order, we're saying, like, that's a really, really big statement. Which data? About whom? oh, well, we've got their email address and maybe their first name, and maybe that's accurate. Like, what else do you have? Not a
Yeah.
lot, right?
Uh,
Not a lot.
because ESPs don't really have a lot of places most of the time just to put content. And if they do have somewhere, then to marry it up with rules,
Yeah.
content X to customer Y,
Yeah. Yeah.
and what are the rules behind that? It's quite limited. So yeah,
It's a hard job.
it is a hard job, but that's why again, we call it real time email solutions. It's one of the reasons they exist. They solve a lot of those complexity issues. You know, it is challenging for us sometimes because that customer often has the expectation that the ESP should be able to do everything.
Yeah.
And I think increasingly they're sort of finding that that's not really the case.
Yeah.
And you now got not just the likes of ourselves, but you've got other people in the sort of the ecosystem of the email marketing world, which have sprung up because email marketing vendors can't do everything. Well, not that they call themselves email marketing, more they're multi-channel or omni-channel.
Marketing cloud. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, those sort of things.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, a lot of them don't even send their own email. I mean,
Right.
it's the crazy thing. So you've got deliverability platforms, you've got content rendering platforms, you've got standalone email editing and content management systems. So I know you interviewed Elliot from Taxis, a prime example. You know, that's sprung up because ESPs don't do a good enough job themselves at creation of the email.
I literally, just adding on to that, literally, I rarely have two conversations for this podcast series back to back, but 7 a.m. my time this morning, I had Roland Pekorniak from Chameleon on as a guest. So, like, I talked to him an hour before I talked to you, and that's a la Taxi. Chameleon is, let us make the collaborative work involved in the design of email messages better, easier, faster. Why? Because the editor built into the ESP may not be doing that job to the level you want, or otherwise they wouldn't have a market.
Yeah. Yeah. And then you've also got now this whole range of CDPs or customer data platforms.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which has sprung up, which have really blurred the lines between who is an ESP, who's a CDP. But CDPs and are so varied. I mean, you've got something like segment.com, which is, I guess, to explain to marketers, it's probably closer to Google Analytics in terms of its tag management system in a sense. First and foremost, it's probably how people would sort of almost recognize it. Mm-hmm. And then you've got so many other guys which are much nearer like an old CRM or single customer view platform where, you know, so there's a real mix of things out there, which because the email channel has sort of evolved, I guess, in terms of it's matured.
And the person at the other end of the message has evolved in terms of the, you know, attention they've got, the channels that are hitting them, the expectations that they've got. I mean, the funny thing is, I'm not sure. I'm back to your statement about email marketers not really having deep personalization is sort of a habit, if you will, or a recognized core pillar of the practice. I posed this question on the only influencers list you mentioned maybe a year ago. I said, essentially, what is personalization? Is there an actual in-depth accepted model that says this is personalization? I got zero response, not a single answer. And that's probably the top collection of email marketers you could get.
Yeah. And
we don't even know what personalization is.
No. And I think this is the problem is there's sometimes this tick box mentality around we need to do more personalization. Yeah. So we'll do that token gesture and tick the box.
Yeah.
But it doesn't move the wheel if you do it in a certain way. Certainly not to the extent that you need for the amount of effort it takes.
Yeah.
So we've always thought about throwing around the term individualization, but I think there's enough terms out there.
Yeah.
I don't want to create another that someone else will get the wrong idea from anyway.
Yeah.
Because I've already seen other people use that term, and it's just
as long.
Yeah. So I would say there's a hierarchy, isn't there? There's personalization, which is dear first name or merging data into an email. There's that level. That's going to get you kind of this far, but it's fairly low effort.
Yep.
Then I guess you could count. This is a debate I've had with a couple of on OI is segmentation could be argued as personalization. Yeah. But but you're limited to how many versions can you create. Usually a handful, because you're manually doing these things. Similar to then dynamic content rules, where you will maybe tailor different sections of the email. So if this happens, show this, otherwise show this. Again, you've got to write those rules. So it's only going to be as personalized as as many rules you can write and maintain.
Mm.
Then you're into the world of algorithms and things where you are getting to the point of individualization. And this is the bit where there's probably a lot of stuff happening at the moment.
Yeah.
But as you touched on with AI, it's only as good as the data behind it,
Yeah.
and the algorithm.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of functionality that's perhaps been produced, not just in personalizing the content of the email, but in predicting the best time to send an email, predicting which customers are going to churn, those sort of AI solutions where you kind of get the feeling that how it's come about is a developer at the marketing cloud provider, should we say, it's given their newfound term, has probably played around with one of the off-the-shelf tools from Amazon Web Services or so on, and they've generated this generic sort of AI model, which is just a pre-programmed algorithm which can take your data and everybody's going to get it spat out in the same way to come with the same results, and it's promoted as being bleeding edge or whatever term you might want to call it, but it's not proven tech, and it's not tailored to you as your business. So every business is going to using that technology, whether you're, say, an airline, discount retailer, or a luxury goods company, you're using the same algorithm. How can that possibly get you the optimum sort of personalization to the customer?
Yeah.
So
and if we don't have a solid definition of personalization, the old axiom, you can't manage what you don't measure. If we don't have a structure for that we can measure, then how the heck do we measure the impact of the thing? So we're sort of back to, it seems promising. Let's try it. Oh, gee, that helped a little, but there's no real accepted. If you do this, you'll have X% different results. I'll give you one example. I'd be curious about your reaction to this. I've booked stuff through Airbnb more than a few times, although not in the last 2 years very much. Thank you, COVID. But planning a trip for the summer, I went on Airbnb and did just a little bit of I wonder if we could get a place in this small town up in the tip of Washington. 2-3 days later, I get a really nice looking email from Airbnb. I'm like, hey, looks like you're looking at Republic, Washington. Yeah. Very, very, very personalized. Like, not only was it to me, my inbox, my name, that town, that time. Why? Because they had the data.
Yeah.
Right. And, I showed clear intent by browsing that city. Obviously, they bothered to connect the dots, record the browse or the potential booking activity, push it back over to the email system. I mean, big company, very good at their game. That's not a trivial amount of work. And I'm guessing they wouldn't do it if it didn't help them move the dial. Right. Did it remind me? Oh, yeah, I didn't book that trip. Sure. Useful.
Yeah.
But man, that's an exception.
I think it's quite a common one, the remarketing piece.
Yeah.
Is where personalization at that level is used a lot, cart abandonment stuff.
Cart abandonment, sure.
Yeah. There's a few problems with that though. A lot of people won't measure it correctly. So you may well have gone back and booked directly anyway, even if you didn't get that email.
Yeah.
And a lot of the providers there's specialist cart abandonment providers out there nowadays, which charge you a commission for that sort of email service. So they'll go to do it all for you.
Yeah.
And they'll say anybody which, in your case, made a booking on the back of that, after received the email, we're going to count 100% of that revenue as we generated that.
Right.
So therefore, you might pay, say, 5 to 7% commission on that. On a standard retail site, you might expect a cart abandonment natural return rate of people which abandon their cart, but they come back and buy later. Let's say it's 14%. If you send the emails, you might get 16% return rate. A classic series of 3 emails spread over a few days. If you say the 16% is your real revenue, that's a complete lie. If you're using your click-through funnels or just a match on who's got that email, in reality it's that 2%. So while those emails are great, they're often measured on, but also they don't generate that much scale. Some of the numbers you see bandied around by people on them, perhaps not incremental, should we say. And this is where a lot of people, I think, get personalization wrong, is they look at those sort of easy to use, sort of easy journeys to sort of put them in, like abandonment, browse abandonment, that sort of thing. Maybe next purchase, but there's not much scale in those. The key thing is, what about the 99.9% of the emails that you send, the business as usual emails, if you like? How can you scale those?
Yeah.
With personalization, that's where the money is.
That's where the money is. There you go.
If you make a 10% increase there, that's going to blow away every sort of trigger that you can probably do in terms of what incrementally delivers.
It's worth making a side observation that cart abandonment messages also have a root assumption that the customer is stupid.
Yeah.
I did leave it there. You're absolutely right. I chose to leave it there. I didn't need you to tell me I left it there. Thanks. Might piss off.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
No, we're not going to Republic, Washington. Don't bother me. Right. So
exactly that. And I just think that actually, if you just sent any email at that point with your logo, I mean, if you look at most business as usual emails, you look at where a lot of the click-throughs happen, logo top left, the nav bar that you put in.
Yeah.
It's because, and Delaquist was the one which really went on a lot about this, but it's true. You don't even have to open the email to be influenced by it and be behind it.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. You're right.
So how much of it is really the content you put in that cart recovery email, and how much of it is actually just because they saw your brand in the inbox in the first place?
Right.
As well as, of course, then likely to come back in the first place.
Yeah, I get more non-linear about it. I'm thinking, and I'm not picking on Airbnb. I'm just using it as a proxy for this whole set of issues at the moment. But if they'd have come back with parks, hikes, bike trails, whatever in that area, as opposed to the really linear, you looked at this and we want you to book it, that might have helped me make a decision that I obviously didn't make when I was looking at the cart, so to speak.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's a tough, complex, and very ironically immature terrain for marketing. Like the content that actually moves people to act seems to be the last priority on the list. We throw technology at everything except the content in a lot of ways.
Yeah. And there's one other big barrier to personalization in email marketing is email marketing is generally used as a push mechanism to support the company's short-term goals. In reality, it's we have a promotion, we need to push it, and
Sales.
but that becomes a barrier because actually that's not customer-centric content you're putting out there.
Yeah.
So you as a marketer have that first hurdle to overcome. How do you do personalization when you can't? You're not in control of the content going out in the first place.
Right.
And everybody's after big numbers to send something to, because big numbers means, more revenue is a theory, isn't it? But we all know that actually it's only a small percentage of your list which is going to respond to that particular offer. And in advance, you could work out who's the most likely to respond to this offer on, say, camping equipment. Well, this segment of customers, which we know have an interest in camping equipment, or this segment of customers should look like the customers we have which buy camping equipment, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's another area that hurdle they have to overcome.
Yeah. And the complexity of making an email message render, display, look good at all, is such a source of friction in that chain of decisions. We end up back at where I think you were starting about some of the production efficiencies and flow efficiencies that the so-called real-time sector bring into the email marketing game that aren't really possible with the editor HTML, the conventional tool set, if you will.
Yeah, or there's things, they are possible, but they take a long time.
Right.
And they take another person, they take a coder. And the more people you add into that chain, you're exponentially increasing the amount of time it takes to create, test, sign off an email. Just the communication string gets so long.
Yeah. What what I read somewhere, and maybe you'll have a bit more accurate data about this, but it's something like average of 2 weeks, the cycle of how long it takes to say we're going to send marketing email X before it goes out the door. It's not done the
No.
day of. It's frequently planned out way in advance, reviewed, signed off, revised, lots of cooks in the kitchen, lots of inputs, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and it's why emails are often sent at 5 p.m. because it's got to be sent then. Otherwise, I'm leaving the office. It's not going to get sent.
Yeah.
It's just, when I was, in the email vendor world,
Yeah.
we had a managed services team, and the poor person whose client they were looking after on Friday afternoon,
Yeah.
6 p.m., and they're still in the office because they're waiting for that final sign off.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the client signs it off. There's some sort of error in there, not necessarily something we've introduced, but some content which isn't quite right, matched to the website. Monday morning, you get that phone call. Well, that went out wrong. Well, yeah, that's the sort of impact that those sort of processes have.
Yeah. Yeah.
Stressful for everybody.
Stressful for everybody. Now, I've got to tell a tale and compliment the company you already mentioned, big dog in the real time space, Movable Inc. I went down a couple of years ago to a roadshow event that Message Gears was making a tour, sort of introducing himself to the world, and they work closely with Movable Inc. And they had a speaker come in from the email group at the outdoor retailer REI, who happens to be based in Seattle, south of me here. And the REI guy had this rave tale to tell about the REI Daily Deals email after they brought real-time content into the mix. She's like, instead of someone being stuck with, you're on the hook for Tuesday's daily deals, you're going to be here till midnight dealing with the last minute changes in this and the send, et cetera, et cetera. He said, we all got to go home at the end of the day when we brought real-time content to bear on that constant set of decisions that have to go out the door in a daily deals email. I was very encouraged by his story, even though he's talking about a different company. I'm like, this could work. Yeah.
Yeah, no, indeed. I think we see that as well. I mean,
Yeah.
talked about the TV shopping channel with their TV guide.
Right, the TV,
Now they don't touch it. But they found plenty of other things to get busy with, so they're still stressed out in terms of because you're not busy on that anymore. So here's load more tasks that we can sort of leave with you. But
I'll tell you the campaign genius story in that same domain. We have a customer who's a custom home builder. So when they send out an email, they're not hoping to sell bananas or a television. They're talking about $1 million homes. But especially with the housing market in the U.S. right now, that they may be gone. They're probably gone. So they really want their email content to be inventory accurate.
Mhm.
So what we do for them is we actually pull the live inventory and pricing and availability from their website at the moment of open, so that the email that customers get are houses they could buy.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, okay, that seems like a good thing. Even one sale, and I think they're probably doing just fine in terms of the cost of the technology.
Yeah, I think so. And I think another example would be things like, if you normally, the way a marketer would pick products for an email,
Yeah.
is they would kind of look, well, let's make sure nothing in here it's got plenty of stock behind it and it's out. But that means you end up with this fragmented stock,
Yeah.
Particularly in a sale environment. So I go back to the footwear retailer where, you'd have one or two sizes left and you
Yeah.
would put them in an email because not everybody's got that size. So you'd look at the conversion rates in Google Analytics of the sale email, and it'd be like 0.2% from click to conversion, because people would click and go, oh, it's only in size 4 left. But if you can use this type of technology with some rules behind it as well to say, only show if it's in stock in that customer size, all of a sudden you've opened up all this extra stock you can't get rid of otherwise.
Yeah.
Out to the market, and it's more effective because it's more relevant to each individual.
Each individual. Yeah. No, that's a really good example, actually. And God forbid they cross-reference my past, jacket and shirt purchases and go, probably got big feet. Let's hit him. for this particular boot sale. Why? Because we got a lot of size 12s on the shelf.
Yeah.
Yeah, that may be somewhere in the personalization model foot size, right? Somewhere down
Yeah.
the complex
But
model.
it's a common thing, isn't it? We also have this term called underserved segments.
Yeah.
So a classic one, maybe in travel, that might be people which travel on their own, or in retail, it would be people with big or small sizes.
Mhm.
You,
Yeah.
they're worth quite a lot per customer, but there's
Yeah.
not many of them usually. So as an email marketer, you focus on Mr. Average generally, don't you? Where most of the money is. But if you can start creating emails which don't take you any effort at all, it's a standard template. Maybe best you change the subject line, you change the hero,
Yeah.
but you've got a system which automatically pulls through the content for that email. You don't have to touch. You can start increasing the revenue you're getting from those valuable but small segments quite
Yeah.
quite easily. So there's that sort of option as well. And this is why I say real time is such a bad term sometimes for
Yeah, and
what
so
we
is
do.
personalization. I'm sorry to cut you off, Sean, but you just said something super insightful, and I'm trying to figure out how to capture it in my head. It what we think of as personalization, like this guy, this guy, this guy, may have more business impact when it's identifying the not the segments. That's not quite the right word for it. The cases of value. There may be one, there may be 20, there may be 500 of them, like your solo traveler
Yeah.
example, and tailoring what's said very much to what makes them different, what makes them special, unusual, particularly good customers for some aspect of your business. And it has very little to do with what their first name is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm.
And I think that's also part of the problem with personalization projects is marketers don't necessarily have the imagination that those things can be done.
True. True.
And
Or
I
the
think
time
that's,
to do it.
yeah, yeah, because they haven't done it before. They don't know it can be done.
Yeah.
Marketers often do the things they know they can do already. They've done it in the past. And I think where we find it's much easier to get business on board with personalization is you sort of turn it round and you start with the business problem. And then personalization just happens to be the means of solving that problem. So
Gotcha.
again, in travel, that's things like, do you have a problem with late availability? Properties you can't sell.
Yeah.
Yes, we do. Well, let's create late availability content automatically that sits in every email, which is going to help you
Nice.
sell through some of those properties you otherwise
Nice.
would.
Yeah. Yeah.
In retail, it might be the sale model. You have lots of fragmented stock. Whatever the problems are, usually personalization and email can solve those. And again, the danger of starting real time content is you're starting with a feature. It's not solving any problems specifically for people.
Yeah.
I think that's where another reason I hate that term.
I do. I do too. Especially since Apple threw that, what's your term, spanner
Yeah.
in the cognitive spokes. Although I appreciate Apple taking on the performance caching job for us. Like, thanks guys, you took a load off, you took a load off our cloud and made things really snappy. But whatever. Yeah, it's going to be a while. It's going to be a while till we see increasing adoption. I am of real time, or whatever the label is we come up with as a substitute. I am encouraged to see the company that's done this for a long time and sort of and has I think the biggest market share, Movable, on a heck of a healthy course. They got to ring the bell at NASDAQ a few weeks back and celebrate I think they've darn near doubled revenue in less than 5 years. So
Yeah.
like, giddy up, good for them. For the 99% of the market that says can afford that, maybe they'll start talking to Reignite.
Or maybe in the campaign genius. But I think there's also something that going back to the value is, again, real time content just doesn't. You talk to somebody, say, even if it's $50 a month fee, if it's not delivering any added value and it just seems an additional hassle that they have to deal with, then
Yep.
it doesn't go anywhere. So you can't just be more cost effective, should we say, than our friends at MoveLink.
Yeah, no, it should not. That's not a reason to do it. You're absolutely right. Yeah, you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. And the kind of true automation, I'm fascinated by your TV guide description, like that true automation of the end content. That's a heck of a value proposition. The fact they don't have to worry about that schedule, it's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a
Um,
big deal.
it is, they just have to remember to fill it in, which on occasions they have forgotten to, which, means it doesn't appear anywhere, but on their website even. So yeah, but yeah, it's about thinking different, because every marketer's brought up in the concept, how we do email is we have this blank email and we have to fill it in manually each time. This is what the textbook says for us to do.
This is the habit we've got. This is how our ESP works.
Yeah.
It's a big piece of it too.
Yeah, and this is what I've done previously in my last few jobs, and you tend to see that a lot of email marketers will bring the same tactics to each job they go to every 2 to 3 years.
Yeah.
And I think certainly in my career, I've always tried to take that step back and really not be influenced by what I've done before. I mean, I use that as a reference, but you have to really get into the nuts and bolts of what is the specific problem that we have as a business that we're trying to solve. I don't think those template approach is really very effective. Again, they can look like they do, because the thing which really gets my back up quite a lot is it comes like attribution, and people claiming X millions of revenue, and they, there's a lot of, in the D2C space, so direct to consumer, there's a lot of people who use a certain ESP who has a certain attribution model, which we say is, I wouldn't necessarily suggest is that robust, which is anybody who has opened this email, which goes on to buy within the next 7 days, we cannot order. And that's used across cart abandonment, welcome emails, next purchase emails, all those emails which those customers, if you didn't send them an email, they could perform massively well anyway. And I think a lot of people do get carried away by some of the headlines they see on those, and they take those simplistic strategies across.
Yeah.
And don't really understand that, it's not really delivering incremental benefit for the business. And I'm starting to see some of that now with MPP. Some clients I speak with, they go, oh, look at our open rates, they're amazing. Now it's rolled out across so many places, and they haven't yet got to the point where they sort of know why, but they're not telling anybody further up the chain,
right? Because it's in their interest. Like,
yeah. So, yeah. There's going to be a point where you're going to have to, say, hang on a minute, why is Open's gone up but Clicks hasn't? Well, yeah. So, while they can, they're using it as a good news story, and yeah, it's in no one's interest long term for that to be the case.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. I had a guest on this show a few weeks back, Pierre Lipton from 1440 Media, not in email marketing. In his case, the company is in the journalism business. 1440 is a daily via email news source. And when we were chatting, Pierre and I were chatting about MPP, I think after we stopped the recording, he noted that the concern that a publisher like 1440 has with the breaking of the feedback loop induced by MPP is that over time, he's going to lose track of who's actually reading, like the engaged subscriber, that's a measure of value for a publisher, right? He's like,
Yeah.
I'm going to have a hard time knowing. I said, I actually think we'll be able to help them with it. I think there's ways to answer that in the cloud of data that you get, but it's not going to be a trivial exercise.
No. And I think part of the frustration with MPP is what I thought might happen has happened is the ESPs perhaps haven't stepped up their game. They've done their side of the bargain.
They've punted completely. Sorry, American term, punted, right? Like, come on. Most of them done either nothing or damage with a blunt measure. Oh, just leave them out. Oh, bad decision mathematically.
Yeah, and I have some sympathy with the fact that I think it was quite difficult to have a strong prediction during that beta period of how is this really going to be implemented? But I think we've had long enough now to sort of say, well, you really should have got something in action better to sort of to help with this. I mean, I know ESPs which they report out what email clients are, and it's still down as unknown, which is horrendous for Apple iOS 15. But yeah, I just think they should have done more in terms of what's your real estimated open rate.
To be fair and very, very inside baseball, that an accurate answer is extraordinarily tricky. We've done it. I've got the patent filings, but I gotta say, wow, this is hard. This is a hard problem to solve even adequately. So yeah, in the ones that have done nothing, in a funny sense, they may them throwing up your hands and saying, "Don't look at open rates," which seems to be
Yeah,
the kind of prevailing email marketing mindset. I I I think it's a unwise overall because you that's it is a different signal, right? Than the I clicked the website, the I read your cotton picking message, or people read this message more than that message. That is a different signal, and it's not a non-valuable piece of feedback, even
yeah.
though it's less accurate. It was already inaccurate. Now it's even less accurate. That doesn't mean its value is zero.
No, but I still think there's a level of accuracy you could get to, knowing that a lot of these opens happen late on in the day,
Yeah.
long after the email's been sent. All of these aren't small companies we're talking about here. We're talking $1 billion companies, and I think it's sometimes a symptom of companies which maybe been acquired, the ESPs, and are maybe in a more some of those are better than others, should we say, in terms of innovating.
Yeah.
But I think the general shrug and have a go, and even if you don't get it right, at least have a go.
Yeah.
And I think the general attitude of not helping, and it's the one place it really needs to be is in the ESP dashboard, because yes,
Agreed. Agreed.
like yourself, you can create solutions outside of it and things, but
It belongs in with the other math.
yeah, and on the consulting side of our business, we're doing something with a very big ESP, which actually allows us to write extra data to the tables. We're gonna flag which ones we think are definite false opens and which ones we think are possible, good open stuff, because it gives us a level of, it's not perfect. It wasn't perfect before anyway, but in terms of when it comes to has this customer opened an email in the last 3 months,
Yeah.
it gives us a bit better of a handle,
Yeah.
because, was it 60, 70% of your audience won't have opened an email? If you've got the best way of handling a lot of deliverability issues is getting rid of the inactives and stuff.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's why I just feel that the lack of support from ESPs has been disappointing, but not unsurprising.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, if you run into ESPs who don't want to tackle this problem, but do want to solve it, like tell them to call us, because we're actually in conversations. We're in conversations with a couple of ESPs about helping them do that with that one narrow, one narrow aspect of the data. I also think the reason it's been difficult for the ESPN platform, the vendors in the email space, to grapple with this is developer and specifically data talent is such a precious commodity at this particular moment. Like, your dev staff is 100% busy already, guaranteed. Before Apple made that announcement, they were already booked out for years to come, and you were trying to hang on to them and not lose them to someone who was going to pay them twice as much. So throwing a very complex problem on their plate, yeah, it's tough to add to the stack.
Maybe, but a lot, developers like complex problems, don't they?
Yeah.
I think.
Yes.
And
Yes.
some do. The good ones do, I suppose.
Yeah.
There's others which just want to work 9 to 5. I get that. That's the same in any profession, I suppose. But there's also the ability to move things around in your development schedule as well. I just saw so many of the webinars from ESPs saying this is what you need to do, marketer, with MPP.
Yeah.
And it just seemed very little about how we're going to help you. This is your problem. We're not necessarily sharing that enough. So maybe I'm being a bit harsh, But yeah, and I guess it gives you a great opportunity because you've solved the problem. So
Well, yeah, we've got a solution to the level of what I think are useful and reliably useful insights. It's not the same measure we're getting before, but we took a different, not to delve into that too much, but we took a political polling approach to the open rate problem rather
yeah,
than a straight math approach, because straight math doesn't work with false with a flood of falsified, potentially falsified signals. But yeah, it was interesting. And my God, back to what you said about AWS and so on, if the cloud compute ecosystems weren't at the level of maturity they are now, it would have
yeah,
been a complete impossibility, because the data crunching is a freaking nightmare.
yeah,
It's
yeah,
just abysmal. Like, just ingesting that, right? When a
yeah,
campaign is going a million opens or 5 million one weekend, just being able to ingest it and not lose stuff, for starters, was hard. And then, watching SQL boxes sort of blow smoke for 4 or 5 minutes on a single query, I'm like, I don't think we can get there.
yeah. I
We
mean,
can get there this way.
the, I imagine that the cost to put that infrastructure in the old way would have been. I mean, Litmus is a really good example. They only exist as a business doing what they do because of AWS. I don't know if you remember the olden days when you only had a couple of options. I think it was pivot veracity and return path doing those rendering
Yeah.
in different email clients. And Paul, who's from Farnell, who's not far from where I grew up, he invented the solution on a couple of old PCs. But for him to scale to the required level,
Yeah.
you know, it
Yeah.
would have. There's no way he could. That's why pivot veracity and return path they were so expensive that even us as an ESP we couldn't afford to use them.
Interesting.
Um, and then also, oh, hang on, AWS, they were able to scale up all these virtual machines running all these different things.
Yeah.
They didn't have capacity issues. They didn't have to build up here in order to cater, even most of the time they'd be down here. And I think that's happened a lot in the email space. Solutions are so much more accessible now at price point, like ourselves, like those guys, like actually a lot of email sending services.
Yes.
It's become a lot more cost effective because of the cloud. And that's been, I think, a huge transformation in the last 10 years.
Well, a startup like Reignite, go 10 years, ballpark 10 years back, you would have needed a VC and $5 to $8 million in data center build out, and then you could start actually doing the work. And now you take out a MasterCard and start reading the AWS documentation, basically,
Yeah.
instead.
Yeah. I mean, AWS isn't always cheap. If you do it wrong, you can have some accidents,
Yeah,
should we say.
that could be an
Um,
expensive hobby. Oh, God.
yeah. So make sure you set up those alerts. But yeah, and it would have also been a lot of hassle. It was the time. I mean, back in our ESP days, email center, we had all our own servers, and I think that's still probably the case. I mean, they're bought by another company now, but we had scaling issues, both bandwidth and servers. But it was the fact that they had to be micromanaged almost along the way.
Yeah.
And you're right, those big boxes, we had to cater for this when actually most of the time we're doing this. But the amount of times that someone would be having to go down to the data center, someone would be up at night just upgrading servers. Yeah, I know the guy, and I don't know how he survived. It was so stressful.
Quick, I knew cloud computing was going to happen story. I was CEO of a venture funded spin out 2005, 2006. Unfortunately, the technology was a decade ahead of the market. It was a music identification and relationship stack, meaning find me a song like this, and it actually algorithmically found you a song like that, which is a lot of complexity to the tech stack. But we ended up cutting a deal with a good sized record label, and all of a sudden we had a couple 100,000 songs that needed to go through the algorithmic analysis, which was about as long as it would take to play the song, full CPU to analyze the song. 3-minute song, I need 3 minutes of a desktop CPU to analyze it. So like multiply that by 200,000 and go, oh crap,
Yeah.
what are we gonna do? And by sheer luck, I was, keeping the feelers out, and I read about these goofballs at Amazon that were making virtual compute instances available. It's just like very baby steps of AWS. And oh crap, guys, instead of buying tens of thousands of dollars worth of Dell servers
Yeah.
and rent this capability for CPU crunching and analysis from Amazon, and we by God did it in '05. But bandwidth was so scarce then that uploading that flippin' catalog of
Yeah.
200 songs securely, because it's crown jewels for the recording company, what?
Yeah.
That was the bottleneck. Like the guy was babysitting the internet pipe instead of the server, but it was still a lot less expensive. Now,
Amazon didn't they used to accept you post in a USB stick?
we were so early, they didn't have
Yeah.
it yet.
Yeah. Because I think it's a case in South Africa where somebody, for a laugh, because their bandwidth was so poor,
Yeah.
I think they sent it in by a carrier pigeon or something.
Well, I mean, now
Versus uploading it.
they'll send a frickin' semi now if you have enough data to transfer.
Yeah.
Amazon has a semi server. We will send a semi to the park
Yeah.
at the corner and plug into your data center and transfer all your stuff.
Yeah. And it's incredible how the world has changed. But I
Yeah.
think possibly it's also slightly scary that we're now so much more dependent on 3 or 4 companies for our entire internet infrastructure. And we do notice that if Amazon goes down,
Yeah.
which it has done on a few occasions, the internet does as well.
Yeah, if the internet does as well, AWS. We're Google Cloud mostly, which is a choice I'm happy with after a good number of years still. But same reliability problem, right? They went GCP had an issue a few months back, and I was like, oh, crap. And I could literally, you can't do anything. It's
No.
It's an earthquake, technologically speaking. All you can do is duck and cover.
Yeah, but I think the nice thing is you're sharing that problem with so many other people. And from a client perspective, in our, again, the ESP days, if our servers went down for some reason because the data center went down, they wouldn't notice anybody else had gone down because very few people had gone down in the world.
Yeah.
So it's purely your problem. But in this new world where AWS has gone down, people are much more understanding about that sort of thing because probably their website's gone down as well. And
I do find myself wondering. I'm a skeptic on a bunch of sort of intellectual historical levels, but with the current buzz around cyber currencies, I'm waiting for someone to go, "Oh, what do you mean I can't get to my money? Oh crap!"
yeah,
Right?
yeah. Well, there's plenty of times there's evidence of people which have forgotten the key.
Oh yeah,
And
in the trolling the city dump for the missing hard drive, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, those sort of things. But yeah, I mean, it's off topic, but I think certainly I know the Bank of England is looking at cryptocurrency
Yeah, same.
based payments things now.
Yeah,
Not in the sense that you and I knows about Bitcoin, but we're our office is in the same place as someone who's working on that technology right now. I mean, I don't understand any of it, but it sounds great, so we're just not. So, in all honesty,
yeah, it's an intriguing frontier. I hate to see us warming up the planet just to find mathematical scarcity.
Yeah, in fairness, this is what they don't do. They don't warm up the planet. Their model of, and I don't fully understand. So again, I just nod.
Me neither.
But it's an environmentally friendly way of doing things, apparently. So it's not like Bitcoin, which is going to end up taking the world's electricity many times over. Yeah,
That's not going to work. That's not going to work. Well, I know we'd wander afield. I should probably free you up to go help people solve real-time content problems, but I knew this would be awfully fun to talk, Sean.
yeah, indeed. Yeah, good to catch up finally.
Yeah. So if you're listening, you go, what are they talking about? The real-time and personalization, reignitehq.com is a good place to start. And Sean Duffy, CEO of Reignite, has been a wonderful guest. Sean, thanks for the hour.
Yeah, no, thank you. Speak soon, Matthew.
All right, man. We're going to hit stop. Where's the cursor? There it is.